Alright, what's going on, guys? Well, it actually happened. We've got some major news to talk about today. As many of you know, here on the channel, we've been covering a story where the parent company of FromSoftware, Kadokawa, has been in talks to be bought out by Sony. This would effectively make Sony the owners of FromSoftware. Now, when that prospect first broke news, everybody freaked out. Nobody wanted this to happen, thinking it could spell the end of FromSoftware, because a lot of people don't trust Sony in their gaming sector, with worries about every future FromSoftware game becoming a PlayStation exclusive. However, as we dove deeper into the intricacies of this deal and the actual reasons behind it, we learned that a buyout for Kadokawa might actually be in their best interest, with some rough-looking financials and the threat of a hostile takeover from the Korean company Kakao. And with that being the case, a Sony buyout might actually be in their best interest. But now it's happened, but not in the way you might have expected. The way this deal just closed might actually be the best case scenario we could have hoped for. As you can see, Kadokawa and Sony agreed to form strategic capital and business alliance, further strengthening collaboration to maximize both companies' IP value globally. And they dropped a very lengthy press release detailing everything about the deal, and we're gonna dive into it. We're also gonna take a look at the way Kadokawa views this deal and what this means for the future of FromSoftware games. So y'all do me a favor and hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring and FromSoftware, and now let's get into it. Alright, so there are a lot of details surrounding this deal, but I think the best way to go about it is just to dive straight into the press release. And this comes directly from Sony themselves, published for their investors. Tokyo, Japan. Kadokawa Corporation and Sony Group Corporation today signed a strategic capital and business alliance agreement, agreeing to conduct a third-party allotment by Kadokawa to Sony on January 7th, 2025, with Sony acquiring 12,054,100 new Kadokawa shares for approximately 50 billion yen. With the acquisition of the new shares, Sony will become Kadokawa's largest shareholder, holding approximately 10% of its shares, including the shares Sony previously acquired in February 2021. Kadokawa and Sony historically have collaborated on various projects, and through this capital and business alliance, intend to further strengthen our collaboration to maximize both companies' IP value globally and facilitate wider and deeper collaboration, such as potential joint investments in the content field, joint discovery of new creators, and joint promotion of further media mixes of both companies' IP. In the future, the two companies plan to discuss specific initiatives for collaboration, such as initiatives to adapt Kadokawa's IP into live-action films and TV dramas globally, co-produce anime works, expand global distribution of Kadokawa's anime work through the Sony Group, further expand publishing of Kadokawa's games, and develop human resources to promote and expand virtual production. Okay, I know that was a lot, but let's break it down. First of all, as you can see from that press release, Sony did not completely buy out Kadokawa. As we discussed in previous videos, that was one of the roadblocks the deal ran into, with Sony only wanting to buy their anime and games, but Kadokawa wanting them to buy everything. So instead, we got a good compromise here. Sony bought enough shares to make themselves the majority shareholder, allowing them to form a partnership with Kadokawa so that they have a say in the decisions, but without being the one to outright make all of them. Now, this is probably the best case scenario for both Kadokawa and us, the fans, because this still keeps Kadokawa as their own entity. This still retains their autonomy. Sony has essentially thrown them a life raft, but said, from here on out, we're going to negotiate the way forward. We're not going to make it for you, but you're going to keep us in mind when making those decisions so that we get first say. But what this does for Kadokawa is, number one, prevent that hostile takeover they were afraid of. Number two, allow them to continue operations under their own company name. And number three, it gives them the support they need, and in a lot of cases, improvements, to continue making the products they've been making all along. But the most important thing from Kadokawa's perspective is that this allows them to keep everything Japan owned, which overall is a good thing, because they'll understand each other's values. But let's look at what the CEOs had to say about this deal. Comment from Takeshi Natsuno, Chief Executive Officer of Kadokawa. We are very pleased to conclude this capital and business alliance agreement with Sony. This alliance is expected to not only further strengthen our IP creation capabilities, but also increase our media mix options with Sony support for global expansion, allowing us to deliver our IP to more users around the world. We are confident that this will greatly contribute to maximize the value of our IP and increasing our corporate value in the mid to long term. We intend to do our utmost to ensure that our collaborative efforts with Sony produce great results in the global market. And the CEO of Sony had pretty much the exact same thing to say, as you might expect. Okay, so they're expressing a lot of confidence in this partnership, but of course everything we're looking at here is all corporate speak. They absolutely wouldn't be saying anything bad about it, even if this was a bad deal. But genuinely, I think more than likely they're both interested in making money, and Sony's not going to do anything to to sabotage that, so I don't think we have a lot to be afraid of. However, let's talk about what this means for the future of FromSoftware. Number one, right off the bat, based on that press release, they're gonna make an Elden Ring movie. That's absolutely going to happen. Now, they're probably talking mainly about anime live actions, but come on, there's been too many rumors about it. And as much as we'd loathe to admit it, this probably does mean we're gonna get a PlayStation exclusive FromSoftware game sometime in the future. It's pretty much inevitable that at least one is going to happen. But here's the good news in all of this. Since Sony only bought the majority shares and didn't buy Kadokawa outright, they're not gonna be sitting there breathing down FromSoftware's necks telling them what to do, like we were all afraid of. With this new deal framework, there's still gonna be that wall of Kadokawa between them. Now, I'm sure Sony is gonna have a lot of ideas to present, but those are just going to be that, ideas, and not commands. So these things will be much more of a negotiation, which I think should bring a lot of people comfort, because again, that autonomy is still there. Now, one thing that we can pretty much bet on too, is that Sony is going to be much more involved in the publishing, which would mainly be behind the scenes and probably wouldn't affect the vast majority of people that play these games, but it'll be interesting to see how they handle that and what their hand in the matter actually looks like. But I think chances are, they're probably just going to leave FromSoftware alone. FromSoftware has been on a generational run lately, and if they're smart about this at all, then they'll just let them keep doing what they're doing and collect their check at the end. I think that's much more likely than them forcing FromSoftware to make some game they don't want to make, Kadokawa also agreeing to it, and then we get a game that's terrible, made for nobody, and FromSoftware dies. I just don't think that's going to happen. And since this is only a shares acquisition, there's checks and balances in place. The majority of this deal is primarily focused on anime, which both Sony and Kadokawa are the major players in. And I think at least for the early life of this partnership, that's what's going to keep them busy. Now, I could be totally wrong on that, but personally, I don't expect to see any direct influence from Sony at least for a few years down the line. Maybe after Nightreign. Worst case scenario, Nightreign drops early on PS5 before other consoles. I hope that doesn't happen, but it is a possibility. But now let's talk about it. Let's talk about Bloodborne, as this is directly now a joint IP between Sony and Kadokawa, if they're smart about it. Now, if you're somebody that was still on the copium, now is when I would start to get interested. It is entirely possible that Sony has been sitting on Bloodborne for all these years because they knew a deal like this would eventually happen. I know you guys have seen it too. Sony has started actually using Bloodborne in their marketing material, when in the past years, they just wouldn't acknowledge it at all. All of that is a good coincidence, and it could be nothing, but I just think it's interesting that the stars are aligning in that regard. If ever there was a time to do another Bloodborne project, now is the best time after this deal. But we're just gonna have to wait and see. Of course, everything we've discussed so far, all of this projections about what's going to happen now, is pure speculation on my part. I could be totally wrong, this could be the death of FromSoftware, but I don't think it is. I think generally this is the best case scenario with this deal, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think. What do you think happens now? What do you think this means for the future of FromSoftware? Y'all let me know down in the comments section below. Either way, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.